should have seen it during DockerCon. Oh, man. All right, we're live in 20 seconds. Here we come, people.
Yes.
Welcome to the show, and my name is Bret, and I'm here with a couple of my friends that we're talking about Linode. So this is all Linode for the next hour. That's why we're on Linode's channel. In case you don't know who I am, my name is Bret Fisher. I'm a DevOps consultant, and I talk every week live on the internet about container stuff. That's Docker, Kubernetes, all the cloud stuff, all the container stuff. We're basically live all the time. So you can show up at my channel. That's Bret.live. You can see that tiny little logo down there. And that's where I'm at. But this day, I'm now showing up on Linode's channel. We're going to have a special show all about their new Kubernetes product. And I'm excited to bring to the show a couple of people from the engineering team. So we now have this split pane thing going on here. We got Andrew in the middle. We got Tim on the side there. And we're going to be spending the next hour explaining what Linode's Kubernetes is all about. They've got this whole feature set that they want to talk through. We're going to have some demos. We're going to have some prizes at the end of the day. We're going to have a special guest show up later in the show that you might have seen around the Linode camps lately. No spoilers there, but it'll be fun. And one of the things you're going to get in this show that I kind of teased on Twitter, in case you saw that stuff, was there's actually a sign-up code that'll give you 3 months of Linode for basically a $100 coupon. And all you have to do is use the coupon code BRET100. That's just one word, BRET 100. And you can sign up now while we're doing this and follow along in these demos. Or we'll tell you that at the end of the show too. You can do that. So thanks, Tim. Thanks, Andrew. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So, all right, Andrew, you're in the middle. You get to go first. Why are you here? What are you doing at Linode?
Yeah, absolutely. So about a year and a half ago, on the engineering team, we were brainstorming, what are the high priority products that our customers are asking for? We do a lot of exit surveys, customer feedback surveys, market research, and we saw that a lot of people were using Docker. A lot of people are spinning up virtual machines, installing Docker, trying it out, evolving their application architecture to be more container oriented. And a lot of people were asking for Kubernetes, help us run Kubernetes, help us deploy Kubernetes. So what we launched very recently was a completely managed Kubernetes control plane product. So you deploy Linode Kubernetes engine, it runs the control plane for you, and you've got Kubernetes up and running within minutes. And we're going to see a demo of that shortly.
Nice. So basically you're taking all the hard parts of Kubernetes, making them easier, so I don't have to be like an expert in certificates and all of the startup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, tell me about PKI with this product. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So all right, cool. And Tim, what about you? What are you doing at Linode?
Well, pretty much the same thing that Andrew's doing. I'm a software engineer here at Linode on the Kubernetes team. I joined the team coming up on, I think, 8 months ago. And I love to code, and I love Kubernetes even more.
Nice. So relatively new in the shop, but pretty much knocking it out of the park. Your first product release, and it's Kubernetes. So I don't know what you do after that. Like, what's a bigger deal than that? That's a pretty cool thing. All right, so let's talk. Before we get to the demos, let's just sort of back up a second, and let's talk about why does managed Kubernetes, like, why do we even do that? Isn't it just like a fancy multi-server Docker thing? Why aren't we just doing it ourselves and solving that problem? Either one of you can answer that question.
Yeah, I'll chime in here. If anyone's tried to deploy Kubernetes from scratch, I think PKI is a great example here. So early on when we were building this product, one of the things we did was we wrote out a design document, and one of the things was a list of all the PKI material that you need. And it turns out there are at least 13 client certificates, server certificates, keys, and other configuration material that just makes it kind of a headache if you really want to maintain these things over time, right? Yeah. Because you have this database, etcd, you have the Kube API server, and then you have many clients of the Kube API server. And there are actually multiple CA certificates involved, and those have different expiry times. So just as an example of why use managed Kubernetes is we're handling all of that for you.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. If anyone out there's ever seen the Kubernetes the hard way from Kelsey Hightower from Google. It's not the way you're supposed to install Kubernetes, but it is a great example of if you did it by hand, without scripting, without automation, without a cloud provider, like all the crazy details. So if you ever get a chance to go through that, it will help you really appreciate what managed Kubernetes can do for you, because it is a lot of work. In fact, I think the first time I did it years ago, I kind of gave up. I don't really tell people this, but like halfway through it, I was like, okay, well, let me just get to the end. I get
it's
this.
really tough.
Yeah, there's lots of certificates here. I get it. Yeah, because it's all encrypted. I mean, that's the thing you want, right? Is you want all of the communications, especially on the control plane, fully encrypted and authenticated. And so now you're doing that for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And other things that we're doing are, I mentioned this database, etcd. If you're familiar with Kubernetes, of course, you know that this is the key value store, stores all of the metadata, all of the resources, and we are constantly performing backups of everyone's etcd and also performing automated recovery. So if for whatever reason you overload your etcd and it needs to restart, you're going to recover a backup that was just performed seconds prior to that failure event, if that ever happens. And so, yeah, just like you mentioned, we're completely automating all of this management, all of these management activities. And this is something that you can use Kubernetes to do yourself, which we're going to demo a little bit later. So
nice.
Yeah.
And tell me, Tim, this is a test for your new job here. Tell me a little bit about Linode, like before LKE showed up on the scene. Why would I use Linode?
Well, our mission statement, I think, really says it all. We try to make cloud computing simple, affordable, and accessible. So our interface, our UI is very easy to navigate. We're really made for developers. So there's some other providers that, I'll be frank, I've been using cloud hosting for like 3 or 4 years, and there's some other providers that even I have difficulty navigating the UI. But with Linode, it's like very intuitive. It's a few clicks and you have a Linode, or you have a node balancer, or you have a Kubernetes cluster. We have great documentation team, lots of documentation that I've learned a ton from. And one of our biggest assets is definitely our 24/7 customer support. So at any point in time, 24/7, you can call in and get live phone support, or via our ticketing system. And we staff people that are like, they genuinely really love helping customers, and they also love technical stuff, Linux, etc., everything.
Nice. Easy. We all went to the cloud because we thought it was easy, and then we realized the cloud wasn't. So I'm always a fan of how much effort it takes to make something that complex easy for the user. So thank you to the Linode engineering teams for making these refining these products over the years, making them better and better. With LKE, what are some of the use cases? Like, why would I, like, if I'm already a Linode person and I've already got a bunch of nodes and I'm running my apps on them, I've heard of Docker, and I maybe even have run some Docker, but why would I run Kubernetes in the cloud like this?
Yeah, so traditionally, this stuff's been around for 5 years, right?
3 years ago, when it was really new.
That's a lifetime in tech.
Version 0.9. I'll say traditionally, Kubernetes is used for stateless applications. Although that's been running stateful applications has rapidly improved even in the past 2 years with the kind of advancement of the CSI spec to 1.0, which is container storage interface. But going back to the stateless side, imagine you have an API and you want to keep that API up, and your actual API workload, it might store state in the form of a cache, and of course, if you've done this before, there's always questions of how do you pin specific load balancer backends to specific API instances so that you can effectively use that cache. But anyway, you're interested in keeping this thing up, so you have multiple instances of this. They might be spread across Linodes right now, virtual machines. But with Kubernetes, you're running a cluster of containers that each have their own IP address within the cluster. And so with just one terminal command, you can say, give me 16 replicas of this API server, and that will automatically be load balanced. And if any of those go down at any time, you've got this incredible redundancy within the cluster. So certainly running your public-facing API is a great use case for Kubernetes, and there's so many more, even as a hobbyist or a personal user, that I can mention as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think especially once you get over the hurdles, and shameless plug, I do sell my part of my job now is I actually make courses on Docker and Kubernetes. So if you're a Linode person, you haven't checked me out, basically just find me on the internet. Look in the description if you're on YouTube. Just search for Bret Fisher, and you'll find a bunch of courses on Kubernetes and Docker. And so if you're new to Docker, you could just try it the hard way, like we talked about, or you could try a cloud platform like this, LKE. Basically, you still need to know like the basics of resources in Kubernetes, right? So like someone has to know what a manifest YAML file is. We haven't gotten to the point where we can ignore all the abstractions of Kubernetes. But the nice thing is about something like LKE is you don't necessarily have to care about what is the expiry on my certificates for my kubelet application, like all this other little nuanced stuff that you have to do just before you even deploy an app. You can kind of get rid of all that, and now you're left with you have to know things like replica sets and deployments, and you have to type some YAML. But you were having to do that probably anyway if you were automating, whether you were using Docker or some other tool. You were already having to write that application description. I'm trying to use another word besides manifest, because manifest is specific, I guess, to Kubernetes world, but. Yeah, Kubernetes infrastructure as code is a thing that we like to talk about around here. So when you went when Kubernetes was becoming popular, right? I'm sure that you were looking at it as a company and thinking, where can we add value here? What are we? What is our? Are we expecting people to run it on their own? Are we going to run it for them? Are we going to auto deploy their nodes? Like, what exactly are we going to do? What was the real decision around like why you decided to build LKE to begin with? Do you remember that, Andrew? Were you in those discussions?
Yeah, I was actually. So, like I said, we were looking at customer feedback and looking at what people were really asking us for. And automatic node deployment is a great example. So in LKE, I mentioned earlier that we run the control plane for you, but we also automatically keep your Linodes, your virtual machines, alive as well, and provide you with the option to scale pools of nodes. So a pool you can think of as a certain type of Linode. So it might be a dedicated CPU Linode, it might be a standard Linode, or even a GPU Linode, or a high memory Linode. And so in LKE, with just a few clicks, you increase the size of this pool, and that gives you more resources in your cluster, and that allows you to run more containers. Right. So yeah, so it really just was, we have this amazing support team who's constantly looking at what people are saying in these tickets. And a lot of people were saying, we want to evolve our maybe Docker Compose setup onto Linodes to a full Kubernetes setup. And so that's why we built LKE. Yeah,
basically people begged for it. So you made it. Not a whole lot of reasons better than that, is that people already wanted it. Let's stop I'm going to stop with the silly questions, and we're just going to get into it, because we got 3 engineers here on the live stream. We should be doing some stuff on a computer. So what would be our first demo, like for people that are new to LKE, haven't had a chance to dive into it yet? What's the first thing that we can demo for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So creating a cluster, it's quite simple, so I can show that off right here.
All right.
So I'm going to share my screen. So can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Excellent. Okay. So this is our user interface called the Cloud Manager. You can reach it at cloud.linode.com. And one of the new products which appears on the left-hand side is Kubernetes. And when you click it, you're presented with this interface which says add your first Kubernetes cluster. And of course, there's a button here. Click that and you are brought to this form. And it's about as simple as it could possibly be. And we really do think about things like minimum number of clicks to create a cluster. We were actually talking about that earlier. Is clicking on the select field really a click? Yes, it is. Anyway, so I'm going to give this cluster a label and call it video demo because we have a little video application.
Can you zoom in on that?
Yeah, let's see. Yes, if I zoom in all the way, you'll actually see our mobile interface. So this is what it looks like on a cell phone, which I think is super cool. We have a great front-end implementation team.
Yeah.
So I'm going to call this video demo and select a region. So LK is currently available in 10 data centers around the world, including Asia, Europe, North America. So I'm going to choose California here and then choose a Kubernetes version. So one of the things we do as a managed provider is keep your control plane up to date with the latest patch version, your nodes as well. We're pushing out disk images that have operating system patches and that sort of thing. And then at the bottom here, we can select some Linodes, select different types of Linodes. I'm going to add 3 2-gigabyte Linodes here. And this is kind of the minimum cluster size that we recommend, 6 gigs of RAM, and that'll cost you $30 per month. So you click this Create Cluster button, and after a few seconds, it'll bring you to the cluster details page. There's a lot of backend API calls being made right here, so that's why that takes a few seconds. And then you land on this cluster details page. So here you see the kind of specs of your cluster. We got 6 gigs of RAM. This 150 gig storage is the local SSD on the nodes. And then almost immediately, LK gets to work, and we have a Kubernetes API endpoint here. So the Kubernetes API, if you're familiar with Kubernetes, of course, you know that this is how you interface with the cluster. It is basically kind of a proxy to etcd and also these controllers that are watching resource types so that your applications will reconcile constantly. Like everything's running a loop and it's observing these resources and then trying to put your cluster into the state that you intend. Then also at the bottom, we see that we have some randomly named Linodes here, which are your nodes, and they are currently provisioning. They already have IP addresses, and you can even click the nodes here and see your standard Linode details page. So we can see the events that are happening up here in the notifications area. You can also see in your activity feed that this is updating in real time, and we are deploying a boot disk. So sometimes boot disks take 20 seconds to deploy. Sometimes they take 60 seconds. It all depends. If we go back to our Kubernetes, now we see a list of our clusters. We can click on this cluster. And okay, so I clicked on the one that's taking a little bit longer here, but these virtual machines are already running. One of the things that updated here was our Coop Config. So this is actually your root administrator credential to the cluster. So it's a really good thing that this is cut off here, or else we would get stream sniped on this. But I'm going to copy that Coop Config and head over to my terminal. So let's actually open up a terminal. I'm going to bump up this font size quite a bit. And okay, it looks like all of our nodes are running now. And yeah, there's so much more I could show off in this UI, but of course you can resize the number of nodes here. You can delete the pool. You can add more pools. We have a link to our incredible documentation at all times right up in the top right there. And so one thing I can do here is go to my desktop and let's create a file with that Coop config.
Can you zoom in some more?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Font rendering got a little freaked out. Okay, so I'm gonna PB paste this to, let's just call this kubeconfig.yaml and put that into a special environment variable.
By the way, while you're doing that, for people that haven't had to manage the Kubernetes command line, I mean, this is a normal thing that if you have a Kubernetes cluster somewhere, whether that's on the internet, in your data center, this is a normal thing, right? So we normally have to for each one of those clusters you're managing, you have a bunch of YAML that authenticates you and authorizes you to that cluster. And it has everything from your private key to the IP address or DNS name of the cluster to the name you're using to the namespace you want to default to. All that stuff's in there. So this is like a normal activity. There's actually a couple of cool utilities you can use, but that's all in my courses. I feel like I'm an ad today, but I don't have a quick link to a video, is what I'm saying.
Brett's a great teacher. Yeah, you should check out his course.
I would just say you could probably just Google it. Just Google Coop Config YAML, yeah, and you would probably find a bunch of utilities.
And something about that Coop Config is we do set a unique context. So if you actually just paste most of that into your global Coop config, then you'll have a Linode context that you can switch to and all that.
Nice. So you don't have to create a separate one. You can just
add it.
Is
that a custom? Is that an alias that you're using? The KWatch?
It is, yes. So K and KWatch, I have alias to kubectl, and then also watch space double quote space kubectl, which is a way to use aliases in watch. I don't know, found it on Superuser. But anyway, so yes, every 10 seconds we are looking at all the pods that are running in the cluster, and we can see in real time they're starting to spin up. And I'm just going to quickly explain what all of these are. So these are the services that are running on your nodes, which implement some of the control plane of Kubernetes. So kube proxy is a so-called daemon set. It's something that runs on each node, and it modifies IP tables to implement something called the service network in Kubernetes. So you can have multiple replicas of a service, but then how do you load balance those replicas within the cluster? That's what kube proxy is concerned with. And originally it was a software proxy, but at some point someone realized, oh, we can just do this entirely in IP tables and kind of push that responsibility to the kernel. And so that's what kube proxy does. And there are actually evolved alternative implementations of kube proxy that are popping up right now in the Kubernetes community. CSI is our container storage interface driver. So this is what makes sure that a specific network attached storage device is attached to the appropriate container. So for example, you could have 20 containers on a Linode, or let's say 4 containers on a Linode, and they each want to be attached to a different Linode block storage disk. The CSI is concerned with mounting the disk, making the API calls to even create the disks. Based on your manifests, you say, I want this container to always be attached to a 20 gigabyte disk. The CSI will make that happen. And then inside Kubernetes as well, you have this service discovery mechanism. So services can reach each other by name rather than IP address. So at some point when you use Kubernetes, you stop thinking about IP addresses at all. I mean, it's kind of ironic that there are potentially tunnels within tunnels of networking in Kubernetes, depending on how you configure it. But eventually you get to the point where, for example, a WordPress deployment will reach a MariaDB instance just by name. So the actual DSN, database service name that you'll use is the name of the MariaDB. So you'll see this little string of how is this WordPress reaching this database? It's just like Maria for public blog, and like that's the actual DNS name of the database inside the cluster, which I think is really cool. And then of course we have Calico. So Calico is our chosen network interface driver. So in Kubernetes, you have to give every pod an IP address, and I'll show that shortly. So we use something called Calico for that. And Calico is typically implemented as layer 3 on layer 3. So the way that your pods reach each other inside of an LKE cluster is via IP tunnels. And we encourage you to like log into the virtual machines and check this out yourself and open up support tickets if you notice anything unusual. But we're pretty happy with how we have this configured and how it works right out of the box. So
yeah, and by the way, this is all under the covers. Someone could actually use Kubernetes day to day and not have to know the intimacies of each one of those applications running. It's almost at this point, like I feel like the goal is that we are abstracting this away rather, and so that people don't have to know this stuff. It's maybe useful for troubleshooting if you have your own cluster, but in my mind, if you're using a hosted cluster, like that's when you call them. when you start having wonky networking problems, like that's why you pay for the support. So
Yeah,
but it's
absolutely.
cool to know. It's cool
Exactly.
to know stuff. Yeah.
Yep. So, for example, to give you more details that you don't really need to know, every pod in an LKE cluster runs in this IP network, which is in the 10.2.0.0/16 range. So you'll notice that every LKE cluster you run, it gives pods IPs in this range. And those are all virtual networks that runs within the cluster. And then shortly, we're going to see how you get traffic into the cluster. So now that we have this cluster, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Tim, to deploy a demo application onto it.
All right, let's do it.
All right, let's get right into it. Can you see this? We're looking good?
Yes.
Yes.
Font size big enough?
No, zoom in a little for us.
Oh,
There we go.
better?
Nice. Yeah.
Cool. So we're going to deploy a pretty simple application. It's a simple Nginx server that's going to display a video for us. That's going to be behind an Nginx Ingress controller, which will let traffic be routed into the cluster to the backend pods. And we're also going to set up external DNS, which will automatically create a Linode DNS record for our service, and also Cert Manager to generate a certificate for us and give us TLS encryption. And in a few minutes, you're going to see how simple it is to do all of what I just said in just a few commands, when typically it's many, many more commands and much more time to do this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to deploy this Linode secret.yaml. I'm not going to show the contents of that manifest, otherwise it wouldn't be a secret. And just like Andrew, I also have K alias to kubectl for maximum speed and efficiency. So we're going to apply this. Next up, we're going to apply the controllers.yaml. And this manifest actually contains a lot of different object resources in here. But to summarize it, actually, these are all upstream manifests too. The stuff in here they're not manifests that we wrote. These are upstream manifests. But they install a couple different controllers. Cert Manager controller, which I mentioned earlier, is going to create our certificates. Nginx Ingress controller, an external DNS controller, which is going to create subdomains and Linode DNS records for us. And this might take a few seconds to apply, because you can see every time it creates a resource, it outputs a line, and it creates a lot. There's a lot of manifests in here. And it looks like we did a little bit too soon. Got to give it a few seconds. We'll try again.
Yeah, the nice thing about the apply command is you can just keep using it.
yeah, it's idempotent, so we can run this as many times as we need. But it looks like the API server might not be fully initialized.
All right, for those of you watching, while we're waiting on Kubernetes to do its thing, this is a live show. So I've got two LKE engineers here, and we're ready for your questions on anything about Kubernetes, anything about how Linode does Kubernetes. So yeah, bring us the questions.
Yeah, so Tim, you could apply the app manifest and then reapply the controllers later.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no inherent ordering to those things. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's get the controllers.
We concatenated all these manifests together, and some of the resources depend on other resources. So, yeah, we can get back to that.
Cool. All right, we'll do the app first.
One of the questions from chat was, is there a front end that runs these commands? I think maybe the question is there a way to not use kube control? Maybe I think that's what there may be.
Yeah, I think that is what the question is all about. So there are some more graphical interfaces to Kubernetes. For example, the official dashboard, and that's something that you can deploy to your cluster and then view in a web browser. It is the case right now in the Kubernetes world that the way to interface with Kubernetes is to at least edit these manifests and then apply them. it's probably the case that you only need to know two commands, kubectl get pods and kubectl apply, to do almost everything that you need to do in Kubernetes. There are also some cool terminal interfaces, like there's one called Flux from Weaveworks. And that's all I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, there's more and more user interfaces for Kubernetes are coming to the forefront. But for the most part, it's editing these YAML files. You can also write them in JSON, actually, if you're so inclined, and yeah, go from there.
Cool.
All right.
Let's try this. We'll try that again in one more second. But I want to real quick look over the contents of this app.yaml, because this is really like the bulk of our application here. So there's just a few manifests in here, and they're pretty simple. And so like if you're deploying this, if you're creating an app like this yourself, this is really like what you're going to be working with mainly. So the first manifest that we have here is our application deployment. It's going to produce 4 replicas of our app, which are going to run at all times for high availability. And they are automatically spread throughout the cluster. And so the app that we're deploying here is asolver/Sintel, which I mentioned earlier it's a pretty simple Nginx server that just displays this open source video that we got from the Blender Foundation. It's pretty cool, actually. It's created using only open source technology. It's from 2013, but they do a new one every year, and they're really neat. Manifest number 2, this is going to create our service. This creates an IP address reachable only within the cluster, so it's a cluster IP, and it's going to load balance our application replicas. So the requests that this service reaches, or that the service gets, are going to be load balanced between our 4 application pods. And the way it does that, for anyone curious, is via this app selector here. This selector, app equals Sintel, is also labeled on each of our backend pods for the deployment. Manifest number 3, this is our Ingress Objects. So just to sum up what Ingress is, for anyone that's not familiar, it's really similar to Apache virtual hosts. So we deployed an Ingress controller earlier when we deployed the controllers.yaml. And now for each one of our applications that we want to put on the public internet, we create an Ingress object. And this is like a virtual host in Apache. So you can create multiple virtual hosts, and you can send all these requests at the same Ingress controller, and they're going to be routed to the correct backends based on host name. And so that's what we're looking at here. We are looking at, under rules, we have host. So demo3.kubiboy.com. We're basically telling the Ingress controller, any requests you get that have the host name in the header, demo3.kubiboy.com, send them to this backend service, which is actually Sintel on port 80, which is what we deployed in this manifest up here. There's a couple other things I wanted to draw your attention to also. This here it's literally how simple it is to create a TLS certificate for this website. TLS hosts, we put our host name here. Cert Manager will automatically create a certificate for us, and we'll have TLS encryption for our website. And here's something that's also really cool. A single annotation gets us DNS. So you add this annotation, external DNS.alpha.kubernetes.io/hostname. It's a big mouthful, but demo3.kubiboy.com, it's going to automatically create a DNS record for this domain that we specify here, and it's going to point it to the Ingress controller. There's other pretty cool configuration options you can give it to, like you can specify the TTL, and these are all done via annotations on the object. So we have 5 minutes here, which is the default TTL for that. I'm going to try.
Tim, I applied controllers.yaml and it applied cleanly. So we were just waiting for one of the, I think we're actually waiting for the webhook server to initialize is what's going on. So yeah.
Sometimes when you cram a ton of manifests into the API server, you can get kind of racy conditions like that.
Yeah.
All right, we have some questions in chat real quick.
Awesome.
Is the K8's dashboard pre-installed, and what about the metric server?
Yes. So, well, I have to say no. So the dashboard is not pre-installed. The metric server is not pre-installed. But we have a great community site post that I can maybe link in the chat, which is a single manifest that you can apply to install the metric server. Of course, the upstream dashboard manifest also applies cleanly. And the reason we did that is we actually wanted to deploy the minimal amount of pre-installed workloads just to free up as much resources as possible on the cluster. Because you can imagine there's some users who don't necessarily need the metric server, so they can install it themselves. In the future, we think that we'll have some advanced configuration options to pre-deploy the metric server, pre-deploy the dashboard, but we're still thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Start out without a whole bunch of extra stuff on there. That's a good strategy. Let's see, what's the next one? Why choose Kubernetes over Docker? That's a big question.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to grab all these questions, but
multi-server, is that like a one-word answer? Like
I think a good example,
Yeah.
in my opinion, would be if you look at WordPress. Like, say you're deploying a WordPress site. I don't necessarily think that Kubernetes. I don't think you need to deploy a Kubernetes cluster to run a single WordPress site. You can just deploy a virtual machine, a Linode, hopefully, with a single Docker container for a WordPress site. But if you're managing multiple WordPress sites, maybe 10, 20, 30, Kubernetes cluster is the way to go. You get high availability, you get replication, you get self-healing. So
rolling updates.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
You get a lot
Absolutely.
of different benefits.
Health
Yep.
checks.
Also, Kubernetes for the most part uses Docker. You can use alternative container implementations, but the workflow is you build a Docker container and then you deploy it with Kubernetes, just in case anyone was confused about that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's still running a Docker container underneath, or as we all know it to be a Docker container. Like, yeah. It's
Yeah.
all right. So we're gonna do trivia here in a couple of minutes. We got one more question, or actually maybe two. And then we're going to actually do trivia for some swag that Linode will mail out to you.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. If we have 1 minute, the demo actually deployed. Can I share my screen for 30 seconds? Yep. Just for 30 seconds. I'm going to share my screen. So something that's really cool that I want to show off is we just deployed this. DNS record. Aha. Okay. I was checking it on a different device. Well, here's what I can say. I encourage everyone at home to visit demo3. Oh, it's not Scintilla.com. It's kubiboy.com. Kubiboy.com. Yay. Okay.
Yay.
Hey, there it is. So this video is actually streaming from a container inside an LKE cluster. We gave a little, credits where credit is due here. Because most of this stuff was done completely automatically. And what I wanted to show off is if we look at the certificate was issued 5 minutes ago, less than 5 minutes ago, and that was done completely automatically. So think back to the first time that you had to run OpenSSL or CFSSL or whatnot to create a certificate. So DNS completely automatic, certificate completely automatic, and that's all thanks to these Kubernetes controllers. So there you go.
Yeah, and that's one of the real powers of Kubernetes is once you've gotten comfortable with the idea of running things on Kubernetes, right? Then looking at the operator community, basically all these plugins and extensions to Kubernetes that use the API plus the database. We were talking about WordPress a while ago. To me, it's basically the infrastructure's version of WordPress plugins. Like every person in the world who didn't know how to run infrastructure ran WordPress and then put a bunch of plugins and made it a store. Obviously, it starts out as a blog, but like you can sell things on it. There's just like every possible imaginable extension for WordPress. But that's what Kubernetes is turning into for infrastructure. So now we have these things like Cert Manager that Tim mentioned. Cert Manager is all about managing your certificates, going to get and Let's Encrypt and all this stuff. And then you have just, when you start talking about database backups, database replication, all this stuff, it continues to be more and more operators out there. There's a thing you can Google called Operator Hub. That is a pretty cool place to discover some of that. There's also there's like I already forgot. There's a GitHub awesome list. There's always if you just search GitHub awesome any name of any topic like Docker awesome or Kubernetes awesome. There's always like someone who has made an amazing list of all the things. I think that's to me the power of Kubernetes is that you can start automating other parts that you previously never considered automating because now that you have this common infrastructure. That we're all building on top of. So, all right, demo complete, and we played the sound effects and everything. I don't know if Andrew heard that, but
Awesome.
Any roadmap to initiate? Let's see. Wait, single node cluster, something like traffic for Ingress to create a lower entry level price point for hobbyists. Oh, so like a pre-built. So the question's around a pre-built Kubernetes cluster with a bunch of basically new additional resources. Like Ingress resources, or certificate manager resources, stuff like that. That's kind of almost like a recipe.
Yeah, I think he's also talking about a potential product that is just a single node cluster that kind of lets you run some API commands, maybe not even others. We've never considered something like that, but it's an interesting idea, and I work with our product people, so yeah, we can think about that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have a way for people to provide feedback in like, is there like a support forum or something where they how do they get this to you other than in a YouTube?
You can open up a support ticket through the Cloud Manager.
Yeah.
Also, if you don't have a Linode account, or you'd rather just you tweet at us, you could send us a message on Facebook. Yeah, but Linode's very, very receptive to feedback. It's just built into our culture. So we really listen to what our customers say, and we take that very seriously. And I've seen firsthand in my time here, customer suggestions get put into real products. So it's really cool.
Yeah. And we have the last question here until we get to the prizes is that certificate included in the price of the cluster? And it is free. So yes, but no. Because Let's Encrypt is always free.
Yes.
And so Linode is taking advantage of an open source tool that is built on other open source tools that we all now increasingly use called Let's Encrypt. So definitely go just search Let's Encrypt. It's a nonprofit that runs it. And it's awesome. So I can just tell you, as a non-Linode employee, I'm telling you, go check out Let's Encrypt. It's a pretty great product. It's not run by Linode, it's run by the community, but Linode is taking advantage of it in this demo. I hope I said that right. And someone was asking about, I don't think we're going to talk about databases today, but someone was asking about managed databases. And he was fairly persistent. So I thought
we are waiting for managed database. Any news?
Yeah.
I can tell you that there's a lot of attention on that project, and it's being actively worked on. So. Yeah. Yep.
Sadly, we're all engineers on this call, and we don't control the future of products, but we do work on those products. All right, let's do some swag giveaways. So basically, what we're gonna do is we're gonna give away. We're gonna ask a trivia question, and this is gonna be tricky. So we have people watching on Facebook, we have people watching on YouTube, and we have people watching on Periscope on Twitter, essentially. And they're all seeing it at relatively different speeds. So the only way to fairly play this game is we're going to ask a trivia question, and if you were the first answer on any of those networks, so like the first person on YouTube gets something, the first person on Facebook gets something, and if there's someone on Periscope that wants to type it on their mobile phone, and if you're the first one in on that, you will also get something from Linode. We'll give you a way to reach out to Linode and let them know that you won. All right. Drum roll. Okay, this is a kind of hard one. So for those of you that are paying attention in the Kubernetes world, so Kubernetes actually came, it was inspired by a Google project called Borg that was inside the company. And so Borg is like an internal tool at Google that runs a lot of their infrastructure stuff. And that inspired the Kubernetes logo. So why does the Kubernetes logo have 7 spokes in the wheel? We need like the Jeopardy music. Although you can't play Jeopardy music because then you get in trouble. Why does the logo have 7 spokes?
We have some answers. I see some answers. I see some good answers.
Clinkers. That is not an answer. All right. So we're going to ignore Nigel's because he's cheating. Good job, Nigel. Way to look at. I don't know if you realized you had the answers in front of you, but all right. So Guy is a winner. Let's see if anyone other than YouTube is gonna. Let's see if we get anyone from Facebook. All right. So so the instructions here. So Guy, you're a winner. Good job. 7 of 9. And sorry to everyone else who was a little bit slower on the YouTube. If you are still on Periscope or Facebook, you still have a chance to win if you run over there really quick and type an answer in the replies. you could be the winner on that side. So the instruction for this, basically what you're going to do is you're going to email events@linode.com. So Guy, if you're still watching, email events@linode.com and tell them that you're the winner on the show. Give them a little detail so they know that you are who you say you are, and then your address so they can mail you stuff, and they will send you out something. Oh, and we got Vincent. All right, that's the next winner. All right, so Vincent, you're the same rules. Email that email address up there, right above our heads, and pull that, send them your info, and you will get a prize in the mail. So, thank you very much. That was a fun game. Okay, so now we're going to pause for a second. And in case you have more questions, by the way, on Kubernetes and Linode Kubernetes Engine, get those into chat. We're gonna come back to those in a minute, but we're gonna pause with Andrew and Tim, and we're gonna bring in a special guest. And I'm gonna click some buttons. And all right, Nigel, hello.
Hello, mate. You all right?
Yeah. All right, you're gonna pop up on the screen in a minute now. No, we'll do that. We'll do this. Boom.
Boom.
All right.
So I didn't have a green. Well, I've got a green screen, but I didn't set it up, so I thought I'd go with a green T-shirt instead.
Very nice. Very nice. Something green for the theme of the day. We've got every shade of green on this thing.
Yeah.
All right. So in case you all don't know Nigel, he is the Kube trainer. He's actually got his own website, Kube Trainer. He's YouTube videos. He's on Pluralsight. He's on Cloud Guru. Basically, you can get all of the Kube training in book format, in video format, you name it, and online interactive training as well. You just got to check out his website, Kube Trainer. Basically, we go back like 5 years or so.
Oh, yeah.
Both Docker captains, so we've been hanging around this Docker Kubernetes train for a long time, and it's been a lot of fun. So he had basically volunteered to be on the show and talk about what have you just been doing like for the last month? I hear you've done some stuff.
Yeah, so I did a series of 3 live labs with the guys at Linode, basically showing people how to spin up a Linode Kubernetes Engine cluster, how to expose a simple web-based app to the internet, and then hooking into persistent storage using the CSI driver. And the thing was, I'll tell you kind of a story here, right? So when we were planning out the series of the 3 live stream labs, is that I allocated a bunch of time to them that I would normally need to have, like to build a cluster on one of the other hosted Kubernetes services out there. And the same with all 3 of the labs. And when I actually came to run through them, when I logged onto Linode and started using Linode Kubernetes Engine, I had this kind of panic that like, oh my goodness, they've made it so incredibly fast and simple that I was wondering, like, what am I going to fill the time with? I mean, it worked out okay, kind of because, we went into like, how does all this stuff work and what have you. But I will say, like, hands down, Linode Kubernetes Engine is, I think, probably the simplest hosted Kubernetes platform out there that I've used.
Nice.
It is the fastest to spin up a new cluster. It is the fastest to make available like a load balancer based service.
Right.
And then, of course, the CSI stuff, hooking into the persistent storage subsystem, that's already baked into your Kubernetes cluster on Linode anyway. So if anybody's looking to like take those first steps with Kubernetes and they want like a really simple on-ramp, then I couldn't go any further than recommending Linode Kubernetes Engine. That's genuine for me. And you can, of course, use either the Bret 100 or the Nigel 100 code to get you $100 worth of free credit as well. So I'm like, what's not to like about that? Simple and $100 worth of free credit. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you're going to be learning Kubernetes regardless. If you think that Kubernetes is in your future, you've got to learn it. and you can now learn it without having to deploy your own infrastructure, and you have 3 months of $100 of credit. Like that's enough to run a lot of. I mean, you saw in that demo there was 3 nodes running, and it was going to cost you $30 a month. So you could run at least 3 nodes for 3 months. And so there's this link. I always get it wrong. It's the opposite of what I think it is. This link right here, Bret.show/LKE. So that is Nigel's, what Nigel was doing all month. That is going to be a replay that you can watch. So basically the recipe here is you go sign up for that replay, you watch the 3 events, and then you use either the Nigel 100, Bret 100, either one gets you the same, on a new sign up, it gets you the same 3 months. So that way you basically now have a way to build clusters, a way to deploy apps, and training on how to do the basics and what's going on underneath. So what else do you need? It's great that Linode was willing to sponsor all of this content, because the thing about Kubernetes, right? Nigel and I talk about that it's a building block tool. Like there's all these different components to it. There's all this stuff you can add on top. So when you're looking at a cloud's Kubernetes, it's going to be a little bit different than the other ones. So you definitely need to invest some time in learning their docs, figuring out what you need to do on that particular Kubernetes. But Nigel and I have been doing this for a while, and we're always a fan of you letting someone else run your Kubernetes, right?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're running your own cloud, and maybe some of you are, but maybe we're running a hybrid cloud in your data center. But unless you're doing that, I would always try to get someone else to run my Kubernetes. Like,
I am all for Andrew and Timothy doing the hard work and letting the likes of you and me deploy and manage applications.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's great to see Linode coming out with this product and having enough of these features like the storage and having these extra things on top you can deploy that work out of the box. I'm glad that we've got more people doing this, because Kubernetes originally was never really designed for the end user to tinker with all the internals. It was really meant as a building block tool so that we could all run stuff on top of it. So I'm excited that we're getting to that, and we have and maybe someday we'll have like some built-in GUI tools that will allow us to drag and drop things and move things around. Who knows? I'm excited for what you all come up with, and you give feedback to Linode, because they definitely are taking your feedback. All right, so we don't have any more questions yet. All right. So, well, Nigel, I think, is that it for you?
Yeah, mate, I'm happy to sign off. Good show, by the way. I enjoyed it. It's always good to get like sort of an insider's perspective on what priorities are and how you build stuff like this. So I enjoyed it. Good job.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks to the team. So we're going to bring back real quick Tim and Andrew, and Nigel's going to say ciao, and he's going to hang out a little bit just in case you have some questions for him, but we can't fit all 4 of us on the same screen. We end up being about this skinny. So let's see. Yeah, let's do the 3 shot. Yeah. All right. Welcome back, gentlemen. We have a question here. What makes LKE stand out most over DigitalOcean's offering? Ooh, a competition question.
I would say this is not even necessarily specific to LKE, but just Linode in general. I think this lets us stand out against a lot of other providers is our customer support. 24/7, you can pick up a phone at any time of any day and get a hold of somebody live that's on the other side of the phone that wants to help you and is there to help you solve whatever problem you're running into.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, especially if you're already a Linode customer, obviously, like that's, stick with Linode. It's when you're a fan of a cloud like this, we want you to do everything, right? We just want you to do it better than others. So like making it easy, like that's what you do. So I think that's sort of, I'm trying to find a place to put this little Bret show link on top of your head. So the link, I'm distracted by the link on top of your head, Tim. So yeah, I think that obviously it running super fast, like Nigel talked about, starting up fast, having that built-in storage provider that uses the Linode storage. That's a good thing. What else? What other questions do people have? before we wrap this up?
And one thing I can say is that the feedback that we get from support feeds directly into project management planning. So it's really your opportunity to shape the future of a Kubernetes product if you use LKE. And of course, everything is ready to go for you right now. But if you have ideas like some of the ideas we heard today, I think that's great.
Yeah. Oops, clicked the wrong button. Yeah, and like you said, Linode's taking feedback. So if you see things in the demos and you want something different, you want something extra, please give feedback to them. That's the only way they know how to make the product better is through your feedback on how you're using it. And it's one of the ways, not the only way. But that is the number one way to really get these tools changed out, because this is a brand new product. So it's like the future, unlimited potential for changes in the future. Like we haven't seen 20 years of Kubernetes, so Kubernetes is still changing rather rapidly, and you will see changes in just the Kubernetes product as Linode adds like 118, 119. As these all start coming out in major releases, you'll also get more features. So, well, I want to wrap this up. Thank you so much for both of you being here, and we just a reminder, everyone, there's a link for Bret.show LKE in case you just joined us at the very end. You can watch this on YouTube after the fact. You can watch this on Facebook after the fact, but YouTube's probably the best way to go. You can get all that at Bret.show/LKE. That's going to get you the 3 different live events that have already happened with Nigel talking you through a lot of these Kubernetes concepts. And then, of course, you can watch this show all the way through to get the demo on how to run the stuff and some demos. And then that Bret 100 code at the top, that's going to work for another month. So basically, for the next 30 days, you can use that code to get you 90 days worth of $100 on a new signup. And of course, I'm Bret Fisher. I'm your host, and I can be found over here at this little link, Bret.live. That's where I'm live every week talking about this kind of stuff, talking about Kubernetes, Docker, all that stuff over on my channel and here on YouTube Live. So thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bret. See you, everyone.